Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating study recently published in the journal Frontiers in Public Health. It explores a highly accessible and honestly surprisingly fun way to boost our mental well-being and tackle one of the absolute biggest public health crises of our time. We're looking at a rigorously tested, data-driven solution that, get this, doesn't actually require a trip to the pharmacy. Instead, it might just require a trip to the stadium.
All right, let's get right into it. The researchers kicked things off by laying out the stakes here, and they are incredibly high. The scientific community is now calling loneliness a full-blown modern behavioral epidemic. And we aren't just talking about feeling a little bit bummed out on a Friday night because you have no plans. No, the study highlights that chronic loneliness has severe, literally life-threatening impacts on our physical and mental health. The data shows that long-term isolation actually drives up cancer incidence, spikes your cardiovascular risks, and elevates overall mortality. It is a very real, very physical crisis.
So how on earth do we fight this epidemic? Well, what if part of the cure involves just, grabbing a hot dog and sitting in the bleachers? That is the core mystery we are going to unpack in this explainer. Can an everyday, totally normal leisure activity act as a legitimate public health intervention?
To figure that out, the researchers had to draw a really clear line between two different types of engagement. We all know about active sports engagement, right? Playing on a local team, running, hitting the gym. The mental and physical benefits of actually doing those things are incredibly well documented. But this study, it focuses entirely on passive sports engagement. That basically means spectating, specifically attending live sporting events. The researchers really wanted to see if simply being in the crowd, watching a game unfold in person, carries its own distinct psychological benefits, completely separate from actually breaking a sweat yourself.
And to get to the bottom of this, they didn't just, survey a handful of college freshmen in a psych class. They analyzed data from a massive, nationally representative sample of over 7,000 UK adults. This data was actually pulled from a government-commissioned survey that tracks participation in culture and sport. Using such a huge, random slice of the population makes this a highly rigorous study. It ensures that the findings here genuinely reflect real people across all walks of life.
Now, to make sure their data was absolutely bulletproof, the researchers had to filter out all the other stuff that usually dictates how happy we are, or whether we can even afford to buy tickets to a game in the first place. So, they strictly controlled for major demographic predictors. We're talking things like gender, age group, or baseline poor health. They even factored in employment status and a metric that measures the living circumstances and crime rates in someone's specific neighborhood. By stripping all of that noise away, they were able to isolate the true standalone impact of just attending a live sporting event.
So what did they actually find? Well, they tested 5 different metrics for subjective well-being, and they uncovered significant wins in 3 major categories. Life satisfaction? Improved. The sense that life is worthwhile? Improved. And loneliness was demonstrably reduced. Interestingly, they didn't see any real change in short-term happiness or anxiety. But maintaining total transparency here, the researchers point out that this actually makes a ton of sense. Happiness is often pretty fleeting, right? We usually bounce back to our baseline emotional state a few days after a fun concert or a big game. But those big 3 wins, those are deep, foundational shifts in long-term mental health.
Now, if you happen to be a bit of a data purist, you might look at the raw statistical variance added by just attending sports, which, full disclosure, lands at a tiny fraction of a single %, and think, okay, wow, that is way too small to even matter. At first glance, it'd be super easy to completely dismiss these findings as mathematically insignificant in the real world. But the researchers strongly urge us not to jump to that conclusion.
And this is exactly why context is literally everything when we talk about data. Because when researchers took that tiny statistical fraction and compared it to the other major life factors they controlled for, they found something absolutely wild. The increase in feeling your life is worthwhile just from attending live sports is mathematically equivalent to, and actually slightly greater than, the psychological boost you get from being employed versus being unemployed. Think about the massive, life-altering mental impact of having a job. Getting out to a game gives you a comparable statistical boost to your entire sense of purpose. It's genuinely mind-blowing when you put it into that perspective.
And the context gets even more fascinating when we look at life satisfaction. The data revealed that going to a live sporting event provides the exact same statistical bump in life satisfaction as gaining 2 full decades of life experience. The study showed that older age groups naturally report much higher well-being. But hey, you can get that same measurable bump in life satisfaction right now just by spending a Saturday afternoon in the stands with a bunch of fellow fans.
Okay, so why exactly does this work? What's the underlying psychology happening out there in the bleachers? The researchers point to the inherently relational nature of sports. When you're cheering alongside a massive crowd, it forces regular social interaction. It fosters this intense social identification. Think about high-fiving a total stranger just because your team scored a goal. That simple, spontaneous act is a huge part of it. Essentially, being part of that crowd acts as an emotional safety net, providing a powerful sense of belonging and a shared group identity that goes head-to-head with the isolation of modern life.
But here is the absolute kicker. This isn't just about feeling warm and fuzzy for a couple of hours. We're crossing over from subjective feelings to actual life-and-death public health outcomes. The researchers make it very clear that subjective well-being, especially life satisfaction, has profound, highly measurable implications for our physical health, our risk of life-limiting conditions, and ultimately, our overall longevity.
Just to put some numbers on that real-world impact, the paper cites previous long-term research that utilized the exact same life satisfaction scale as this study. And that past research found that just a 1-point increase in life satisfaction predicts a massive 34% reduction in mortality hazards. Literally, it boosts your overall survival probability from 85 to 90% over a 20-year span. So even a tiny statistical bump in subjective well-being from something as simple as going to a game can actually measurably protect your physical life.
Think about the profound implications this has for society at large. Live sporting events, and we're talking anything from a totally free high school football game to a premium professional match, can serve as a highly scalable, incredibly inclusive public health tool. The researchers emphasize that this could be an especially vital buffer for vulnerable groups. For example, helping unemployed folks protect their sense of self-worth and social connection when they don't have a workplace community to lean on. A lot of government health initiatives currently focus entirely on getting people out to play sports. But this data strongly suggests we really need to be encouraging and providing better access to simply watching sports together.
So, what is the big takeaway from all this? Given this undeniable data-backed link between sitting in the bleachers, lowering loneliness, and boosting life satisfaction, how should we look at mental well-being from here on out? If a sense of belonging in a crowd is really this powerful and mathematically comparable to holding down a job or gaining 20 years of wisdom, is it time for our doctors to start prescribing front-row tickets to the local game? It definitely leaves you rethinking your weekend plans, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep an eye out for the fascinating data hiding right there in our everyday lives.